Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. Welcome back to Cybertalk, where I'm joined by Christy. So we're really excited to get started, and yeah.
All right, what's up everyone? So it's been a while since we've done this type of format, but we are actually really excited to get back into it. We're gonna answer your questions. You guys have left us a lot of questions in the form that we've posted on social media. The form is gonna be there for future Cyber Talks, so we're really looking forward to seeing your questions. And one point that I want to convey here is that please ask very good specific questions because this way you're going to save us time and you're going to save yourself some time. We don't want to be answering the same questions. We don't want to be answering questions like, hello, sir, how can I use what are the pen test tools that are very good for bug bounty hunters. I mean, these sort of questions have been answered, and you can find them not only on our channels, but all the beginner stuff, you can find them on a Google search, the simplest Google search. So to save us some time and to save you some time and to save the internet from clutter, please give us very good questions so that we can do our best to actually give you the best answers to the best of our knowledge. With that said, we can just jump right into it. Shall I do the first?
Yeah, you can get started with the first question.
Okay, so the first question, how can I master penetration testing using Python scripts? Not necessarily a question that hasn't been answered yet, but it's a great question. So you can start by simply buying my Python for penetration testing course. Okay, I'm joking, but seriously, what do you actually do as a penetration tester? What are the types of tests that you run as a penetration tester? So for example, let's say that you have a target X, a company X, and you're asked to do a penetration test. Now, let's say you follow the PTES standard. That's the penetration testing execution standard, which comprises of multiple stages or steps, such as pre-engagement, intelligence gathering, recon, threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, exploitation, post-exploitation, reporting, and so on. Now, in all of these steps, you probably do a few manual tests. So from the very beginning to the very end of the engagement. And then as you're doing these tests manually, you will be able to see what kind of steps you can automate. Let's say, for example, that you're doing a pen test and you are in the recon phase of this pen test. Let's say this is a network pen test. So in this case, what you could do, and I'm getting back to the question, how can I master penetration testing using Python? You are doing a network pen test. In this case, what you can do, you are in the recon phase. You can write a Python script that will actually use Nmap to automate or chain together multiple types of scans to help you gather better insight of the target, instead of you having to actually manually run each command yourself. So this is a very specific thing that you can do, and this way you'll be better able to understand the penetration testing aspect of it and also the coding aspect of it better. You're gonna be on a path to better understand how you can use Python in penetration testing. And for that matter, that there are a lot of free tutorials on YouTube if you just search for Python for pen testing, and also on both of our channels. And of course, there are a lot of books written on the topic. We also have courses on this topic if you want to invest into your education and pay for it. Do you have anything to add to this, Alexis?
Yeah, I think it was it's an interesting question, primarily because Python is quite an important language when it comes down to cybersecurity and automation, which you rightfully pointed out. Things like automating Nmap scans, automating different types of recon scans, and you can see this with the advent of all of these recon scripts that are currently out there. Most of them have been written in Python. So I think in regards to mastering, Python for penetration testing, if that was the exact question, I think, as you pointed out, automating what you do exactly, because there's no point trying to automate something that you'll not use. It makes much more sense to automate something that you do, and therefore you're much more incentivized to learn Python and to learn how to use various modules and stuff like that. Yeah.
All right. Okay, thanks. You want to take a question?
Yeah, so I think I got asked quite a similar question, but this one was much wider in terms of the scope. So the question is, I've been in IT for over 20 years. I've never done any programming or similar work, but I feel learning a language would be good. What's the best language to learn for hacking? Right. So, of course, this is a loaded question in that it's too wide in regards to the scope. And when you talk about hacking, there's various types of hackings. You can talk of networks, mobile applications, web apps, hacking software itself. But typically, if you perform your research online, you learn that there are pretty much 5 languages that are used in hacking or cybersecurity, and for various reasons. Number one, of course, is going to be Python, because of the ability to actually build and, of course, share modules, and then, of course, the various frameworks that exist. The second one would be C and C++, and this comes into play when you're talking about reverse engineering and talking about debugging or disassembling software. So a good understanding of C and C++ is very important. And then, of course, you have Ruby and Perl, which again are used to develop some tools, and can be or are very, very good for larger frameworks that utilize things like modules, as you can see with the Metasploit framework or the Metasploit console. And then, of course, you have bash scripting. Now, bash scripting is not really a programming language. It's more of a scripting language, which means you can automate tons of stuff that you normally do on your Linux terminal. So these were the languages that I would actually point out, or I would actually recommend, with an additional one that's actually kind of growing in popularity and in use in cybersecurity, and that's the Go programming language, which you can actually see there's an increase in the amount of tools being developed for it, primarily because of the functionality or the thread, the ability to actually have your tool run in multiple threads, or have a multi-threaded application, so you can actually speed up most of the things that would normally be very slow with tools developed in Python, as an example. Of course, not every tool developed in Python is going to be slow, but if you're focusing on reverse engineering and exploit development, then definitely learn C. And when I talk about C and C++, it's also very important to learn secure C and secure C++. Learning how to write C is good, but also learning how to write secure code is very, very good. And that'll also give you a huge insight into understanding how software is written by large companies, how you can test it, how you can fuzz it. Yeah, so that's basically the question. Did you have anything to add onto that?
No, so it's a really good answer. I want to highlight on one of the last points you've said, and that's with regards to Go. So Go is really good, is increasing in popularity, and mostly because of its concurrency feature, which actually makes it extremely fast and very good for parallel processing. So in that regard, is better than Python. So yeah. I'm actually trying to learn Go myself. So it's like it's kind of a slow process, and I'm taking baby steps because I do not devote as much time as I would like. But I'm trying to learn Go, and maybe we can discuss it in more detail in future videos. But what I wanted to say is to actually highlight the fact that Go is a really good really good program that you want to want to study right now and practice. And one of the most recent books, one of the very good books on Go for cybersecurity is, I think it's called Black Hat Go. So for those who are interested, you can just look it up. You can just look it up on Google and see where you can buy it from.
Yeah, it's an excellent book. And if you really want to see the power of Go in regards to creating tools, I'll definitely recommend checking out Go Buster, because it's one of these tools that's really leveraged the advantages of Go and the concurrency, as Christy said.
That's right. Okay, so let's move on. I have a question here: how to choose your first program as a bug bounty hunter? Okay, so right now, there are literally thousands of vulnerability disclosure programs that you can find on public platforms such as Backrowd, HackerOne, Integrity, and so on and so forth. There are programs that you can find on private platforms such as Synac, Cobalt, and other platforms. And there are also programs that you can find yourself using Google Docs. So if I were at the point of choosing my first program as a bug bounty hunter, I would simply look for a program using Google Docs. Now, why? I would do this because being able to find something yourself, therefore being self-sufficient, not relying on platforms, not relying on triagers, is a good place to start. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages to this. One of the biggest disadvantage is that it may actually take a good while until you find a good program where the security team is actually very responsive. Let me give you an example. So in one of the programs that I worked on that had a disclosure policy that I found on via Google Docs, I would be receiving responses from the security team at a frequency of 2 weeks. So that's a lot of time. And then I was paid for the reports after more than 2 months. So obviously this is not very motivating. You might want to focus on programs that are responsive, on security teams that are responsive, not necessarily maybe you send them a submission today and you get a response in a couple of hours, but at least in 1 or 2 days. So like I said, a very good place to start is to actually try to find programs yourself using Google Docs. And when you find a good program, you wanna have a good direct channel of communication with the security team without having interference from the platforms and triagers. This is a good thing. And Google Doc that you can start with, so you can just go to Google and type in responsible disclosure reward and start from there. It's gonna be, you're gonna have dozens and maybe hundreds of pages to actually find good programs to start with. So you can just go from there.
That's excellent advice. I think that's a very good question because it's usually the first roadblock. You know, as soon as someone is ready to begin, is what program do I start with? Is there a correct one? Is there a perfect one? And I think to add on to what you said, I think also having an understanding of the types of vulnerabilities that you are going to try and find is really important, or having a focus. And of course, I say that knowing that bug bounties can be a bit of a random affair in regards to what you'll find, but I think learning a particular vulnerability first and how to exploit it, how it works, and then going out in the wild, reading reports, learning how this particular vulnerability can be exploited is really important. So I think factoring that also into your decision is very important. But as you rightfully pointed out, I think starting out with ones in which the disclosure is with the developer team or the security team is much quicker in regards to the response, so that you actually you make some progress instead of it being it taking maybe 1 or 2 months. The other piece of advice that I would like to add on to that I've actually seen working or has started to work is that I've seen that whenever I've told anyone who asks me this, I've usually told them to start off with sites that are local to them. Now let me explain this. So the reason I say that is because they're already familiar with these platforms, right? When I say sites that are local to you, I mean sites that are probably within your geographic location or provide services to your geographic location, starting out with sites that you know. And of course, not all of them will have, responsible disclosure or a disclosure for that matter. So you need to, pick and choose which one actually has that. But I've seen some great results with this because they actually know how to use the site. It's important to them, and they're much more likely to be incentivized by more than just money. So yeah, I just wanted to add that on top.
All right, good.
Right. So I'll move on to the next question. So the next question it kind of ties into what you already said, but the question is, hello, I've heard a lot that you can work independently in cybersecurity without having a certification or degree, but I'm not able to find a straightforward way. So please talk about working independently in cybersecurity. Thanks a lot. You guys are doing great work for the community. Right. So
Thanks.
when it comes down to cybersecurity and working independently, of course, the additional piece of information there is the ability to work without a certification or degree. I think that probably the best way to get some experience or to start working would be to actually get started with bug bounties and security research, primarily because there is no barrier to entry in regards to getting started. You don't need a certification to actually enter a program. You can essentially just get started and work your way and build up your experience that way. And then, of course, you can start getting certifications. Now, the other thing that I want to point out, and rightfully so, is that you don't need a certificate to become a security researcher or to work independently in cybersecurity. And the reason I say this is because if you're really not focused on getting employed or working for a particular company, then and you're focused on bug bounties, then you really don't need a cybersecurity certification. In that, certifications are excellent when it comes down to learning, because you can actually learn quite a lot in a very short time, and you're incentivized to do so because at the end of that, you actually get the certification. And in regards to companies, certificates are essentially set up or establish a baseline for employee performance to ensure that this particular individual is skilled enough to actually join us. And of course, it adds another layer of accountability. And employers, when they look out for cybersecurity certificates or pen testing certificates, they're typically just looking for a guarantee or a way to ensure that you're skilled enough. So I just wanted to clarify that. So in regards to working independently, I think bug bounty is a great way of getting started, building up your experience. And then once you have experience, you can then start getting these certificates and stuff like that. And of course, you have the additional option of working as a freelancer and starting to offer your services, and therefore building your experience and reputation. That's as far as I can say, without any degree or certifications. Did you have anything to
That's
add on
right.
that?
Yeah. So you don't actually need anything to start as a security researcher or bug bounty hunter. You don't need any certificate. And I would actually go for that. The fact that you don't need a certificate doesn't actually mean that it's going to be easy, because it's probably going to be very hard right now, since a lot of people are doing bug bounties, since there's very low barrier to entry. Because you don't need a certification, that actually means that you'll have to put in maybe 10 times as much work than someone who's getting contracts on a daily basis via penetration tests. But if you put in the work and if you do report valid submissions and if you start getting paid, you do not necessarily have to get certifications afterwards, but you'll probably have to you will have something that you can put on your resume, such as found bugs in this program. Maybe you're gonna appear on their Hall of Fame and all that stuff. And then it's gonna be much easier for you to get the freelance contracts without even having to have any certification. You might require a certification if the employer asks for that, or if you're working in, or if you're actually looking forward to work in a job that's a governmental job and it requires some sort of a precise certification. And there are jobs that actually require certification, but I think that in most cases, if you can show your skills, the skills were actually gonna speak for you and not necessarily the certification. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Absolutely. And again, certificates like the OSCP are excellent in of course leveling up your skills. So I just wanted to point that out, that if you're looking at certifications as just documents to get jobs, then you're looking at the glass half empty or half full, right? And you should be looking at certifications as a legitimate way of leveling up your skills and focusing on improving your skill level. So yeah, I think we can move on to the next question.
Will AI overtake cybersecurity in the next 5 years? And what should I do instead? Thanks. Okay, so this is an awesome question because it's actually very near and dear to my heart. So first off, I think undoubtedly that AI is going to take over a lot of jobs, not only in the cybersecurity field, but in many other fields as well. So this is not only going to happen in the future, but also as we speak. There are already algorithms that actually run full-fledged pen tests, and even algorithms that work in incident response monitoring and management. So you can, for example, look up Darktrace. For those of you that don't know, who's kind of a cybersecurity algorithm, but look up Darktrace. And I actually did a lengthier video on the exact topic, and you can find it on my channel. But yes, AI is going to get a bigger chunk of the cybersecurity pie, so to speak. So even so, not everything is lost for pen testers, bug hunters, security researchers, and the rest of the people working in cybersecurity. There are many steps in the research process, for example, in cybersecurity, that require some sort of a human eye. And it will take a lot of AI advancements for that to actually be completely replaced. So what I want to say is that if you keep yourself in the learning process at all times, it shouldn't be an issue for the next couple of years. So if you're a lifelong learner, and this is actually kind of the definition of a hacker, of a cybersecurity person, these are curious people. They like to learn at all times. You should identify with this type of persona if you're in cybersecurity. And if you're someone who's curious and someone who's always learning, this shouldn't be an issue for you. Now, moreover, if you want to have an edge over other professionals in the field of cybersecurity and also actually protect yourself better, protect yourself from being completely replaced by AI, what you should do is you should actually be learning machine learning, which is the very basic or the very algorithms that power AI. So in this case, what you'll do, you will learn how to build AI algorithms yourself, or you will be better. So by learning machine learning, you will be better at debugging or fixing AI algorithms when they malfunction. So think about that.
Right. That's a very good question, and I just want to add a little bit onto that, and sort of counter that a little bit based on my own experience. Well, firstly, I want to point out that, as you said, rightfully so, AI is already being used in cybersecurity to a large extent, and primarily in these areas, because I've actually been getting into it quite a bit, and I've actually seen the use cases and the potential use cases. So, firstly, we have seen the increased use of machine learning and AI in the form of intrusion detection systems. It's also being used for malware analysis, classification, and detection. So again, it's helping companies and their antivirus solutions improve the ability to analyze, detect, and identify malware, almost in real time, right? And that's a huge thing if you come to think of it when you're talking about intrusion detection systems. Not only are the intrusion detection systems right now quite advanced and quite capable at actually blocking attacks, and of course at the same time logging it, but now with AI and having these huge amounts of data that they can gather, or that companies can gather from multiple sources, multiple companies, you can build up a huge database of attacks, the types of attacks, potential malicious URLs, so on and so forth, and you can increase you can really increase the ability to detect and identify malware. The second thing is that I wanted to point out, as Christy already said, is and this is again close to me because I work closely with these systems on a day-to-day basis, is the usage or the increased usage of artificial intelligence with the security information and event management systems, or SIEMs as they're called. And of course, the integration of these helps these systems adequately respond to the attacks in an increasingly intelligent way. And of course, the most important thing is the ability to classify these attacks, and artificial intelligence is really helping with this. And then just to close off, another interesting area that I've said, there's actually a few projects. I can't actually remember the names of these particular projects, but AI is also being used to detect malicious URLs. And this system and service is being integrated into companies to prevent phishing attacks. So, for example, if an employee clicks on a link and the intrusion detection system or the firewall is able to pick up on this particular traffic as irregular, because a huge part of artificial intelligence in a company or enterprise network is building a model of what the daily routine is in regards to the activities that are being performed by employees. So over the course of a month or a year, and then of course when these phishing attempts or attacks are targeted on towards a company or an employee, it's very easy for artificial intelligence to actually detect and say, what, there's something wrong with this. This is highly irregular. It's connecting through on unspecified ports, so on and so forth. So I'll just end it by saying that AI is going to have a huge part to play in cybersecurity moving forward. And as Christy said, your ability to learn and adapt, with the inclusion of cybersecurity in of artificial and cybersecurity will be really important moving forward. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So I'll move on to the next question. So the next question is kind of a long question, but I'll try and shorten it down and explain it. So the question is, hi guys, really love your channels and everything you've been putting out. I would really love a discussion between the different environments for pen testing, i.e. virtualized guests versus Docker containers for each tool versus Linux hosts versus remote machines or virtual private servers. I think that's what he's trying to say. Discuss the technical boundaries and limitations of each. Obviously, in the end, each is a matter of preference, but given the new Docker videos and the Linux guides uploaded, we might as well compare them. So he's essentially asking, the differences between these virtualized environments for pen testing and cybersecurity, how they differ, and of course, he's also mentioned the obvious element, which is preference. So again, this question is quite simple to answer. And of course, the quick answer to this is it all depends on your requirements, right? As a penetration tester, and how you're going to be doing your security research. These two elements will really factor in your decision in regards to what virtual environment you set up. So it's obvious here that they're making reference to Docker, which is a containerization technology. We then have a virtualized Linux guest, and of course, the use of virtual private servers. So if you're running a workstation at home or in your home office and you're building a virtual hacking lab, then I'll definitely recommend, using a virtualized Linux guest and building your network around that. So having multiple VMs either running in VirtualBox or on VMware workstation, if you actually can get that license, because it just works a whole lot better. Now, when we talk about Docker containers and containerization in general, containers were essentially set up to provide or to deploy pre-built environments and essentially get rid of the hassle of installing prerequisites and all of that. So when you talk about Docker images, for example, the bug bounty toolkit that I'd set up quite a while ago now, the reason I set that up is, again, I set it up for myself because I would typically use virtual private servers, either on Linode or DigitalOcean, maybe sometimes on AWS. And I would want a pre-built environment that was up to my standards, that had the tools that I wanted to be deployed really quickly. So I could, set up Docker and pull the image down quickly. And, I would have my environment set up really quickly without any hassle. And I'll be able to get to work. And of course, that also, that covers the preference bit of the question, because you can see that it'll really differ based on your approach or the types of assessments that you do. Now, I'll just end off the question by also pointing out that you can't really compare these technologies using a hypervisor and then, of course, talking about containerization technology, primarily because Docker isn't suited to provide an entire operating system experience. It's there to provide a packaged pre-built environment. And I personally would recommend Docker if you're building really specialized toolkits or environments that are set up that way for a reason, right? If you're going to be doing tons of hacking and working with VMs and all of that, then I would recommend just using a virtualized Linux guest, regardless of what your host operating system is. So that's basically the question. If you want to use a virtual private server, then you can definitely use Kali Linux with Docker, and they already have the repository set up, so you can install the tools you need. So yeah, that's basically what I would say. Did you have anything to add on to that?
Not really. I mean, as you've said, it's context dependent. So depending on what you want, you'll be faced with different options. For example, if you have a laptop that doesn't have a lot of resources, you can simply hop into, if you can get a cheap VPS with very powerful resources. For example, I've talked about this in multiple videos of mine. I've used Paperspace and also DigitalOcean. I think on Paperspace, I was able to configure a server with 16 gigs of RAM, very good SSD. It was, I think, 15 or 100 gigabytes, 8-core CPU for 16 or 25 cents an hour, which is very cheap. Yeah. So you don't actually need to buy a very expensive laptop or use your own resources. You can just pay for a VPS and actually have all your tools in there and just do your thing. It's context dependent. So whatever your context is, you're gonna make the best decision in your specific scenario. All right, let's move on. Another bug bounty question. So how to check if the assets of a bug bounty program are changing, new subdomains, new endpoints, etc., with automation. So Yeah, I love these types of very specific questions. Of course, you can actually build yourself some bots to do all the work for you, which is why I highly encourage everyone to learn some sort of a coding language, be it Bash, Python, we already talked about as Golang or JavaScript. These are my favorite picks. But to give you a very specific answer, for example, if you want to monitor if JS files of a certain bug bounty program are changing, which is very often the case because developers make changes, make code changes, even on a daily basis, you can combine a tool which is called Script Hunter, which is written in Bash, with another tool called Get JS Words, which is written in Python. And I'm going to actually link a blog post on to the securecoding.com website that shows you exactly what and how to do that. So you combine these two tools to actually be able to monitor changes in JS files. There's also another tool which is called JSMon that will actively monitor changes in the JS files you set it up to monitor. And this tool can actually send you notifications or results via Telegram, which is really cool. So it's called JSMon, and we'll also link it up in the description of this video. Yeah, that's it.
All right, that's interesting. That's also a question that I was looking into myself, given that that's something that is very, very important in the context of bug bounties, especially when you have programs where they're constantly making changes, as you said, to the code. Right. Okay. So I'm just going to move on to my final question, which is a very simple question, but a good question nonetheless. One that I think is not really asked that much, but the question is, how should I start Windows reversing and Windows malware analysis? So they're very specific this time. Please, would you suggest a path to start with or courses to start with? Right. So again, I have first-hand experience with this, and I'm pretty much going to give you the same advice that I would give anyone. And it's very important that these steps are taken seriously, because in my experience, these are the key elements. So firstly, you should be able to write some basic C and C++ code. And when I say that, what I mean is you should be able to write it and read it. So if you actually look at a C program, you should be able to tell the difference between a function, a class. You should be able to, to actually, you should be able to actually tell the difference between whether or not a string or an integer is being returned into a particular function, or is being used outside of the function, and understanding buffers within C. So again, a good understanding of how to read and write C++. And then, of course, the second aspect, which again has helped me tremendously, especially when we talk about malware analysis and being able to reverse engineer it, is understanding secure coding. Right now, when I talk about secure coding with C and C++, it's really important that you know this, because with most of the new products or programs being written for Windows, most of these principles are actually in place, and you'll not find buffers buffers that can be overwritten anywhere or within any program nowadays. So you need to understand what code is secure, how secure code looks, or what it looks like. And of course, you should be able to tell the difference between a function that has been written with secure coding principles in place and one that hasn't, and how they can be exploited, right? So that's a very important step. The other important thing is having an understanding, a fundamental or rudimentary understanding of assembly and CPU registers, what they are, what they store, what values they hold. Because when you talk about disassembling software or malware for that matter, you'll be dealing with registers quite a bit, and understanding assembly at a low level, which it is actually a low level language, is very, very important. And then, of course, you can talk about things like static analysis, which is quite simple. It's primarily just getting a fingerprint or understanding what this particular malware has in regards to the static assets and resources. also generating a hash or a signature of that particular malware. I would then recommend learning about debugging and debuggers. Yeah, of course, I would recommend the GNU debugger or GDB on Linux. It's a great way of getting started. It's really, really clear and a very, very simple tool to use. The documentation is excellent. And what I would recommend doing is writing C programs, insecure C programs, learning about buffer overflows, and then taking them through GDB or the GNU debugger and actually seeing what happens stage by stage. Once you're familiar with debugging software and understanding exactly what's happening, you can then move on to learning disassemblers. So IDA Pro and Gydra or Gidra, however you pronounce it, understanding how to use these tools, how to use them to perform reverse engineering or disassembly. And the way you can actually practice this once you get started with these tools is by taking a look at various reverse engineering CTFs, reverse engineering binaries. That I think one example of this is on a site called CrackMe's. You can actually take a look at this site. CrackMe's is a great way of actually seeing whether you understand what you're doing, how to use the tools that are currently out there. And your job is to actually find a particular string or a flag within these binaries, and you do that by disassembling the software. So it's a great way of learning about how to use the tools. And then, of course, to end off this question, when you talk about malware analysis, the best way to learn about malware analysis is firstly to read other researchers' analysis of a particular piece of malware. And you really need to do this because, number one, you'll develop a methodology for performing malware analysis on a piece of malware. You learn about the different stages: static analysis, dynamic analysis, and then of course a behavioral analysis, and then of course the classification process. So then you can get started with very simple and old malware samples that have been discovered in the past, and you can see what you can find essentially. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say regarding that question.
All right. Okay. Another one. Do either of you have your OSCP? If so, what were some of your favorite resources when learning the concepts in the OSCP? Also, did you prepare for the exam before starting PWK, which is penetration testing with Kali Linux, or did you jump right in? So in my case, in my example, I got my OSCP back in August of 2019. So right now, as much as I stay away from CTFs, Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, all those similar platforms, I don't do that. I used to do a lot of HTB before doing the OSCP training officially. But after I got the OSCP and started doing bug bounty and security research, I had I had literally zero interest in going to these platforms, because with bug bounties, I'm able to actually have a direct, real world positive impact on the security of companies with disclosure policies. So HTB and CDFs are actually non-appealing to me right now. But to better answer your question, I would say that before getting into the training, you do have to have some good foundations in cybersecurity and penetration testing. So that's when you start the training. And other than that, offensive security, after you buy the course, offensive security gives you all the materials you need to succeed in passing the exam. So you don't actually need anything else. All the learning materials they provide when you actually buy the course are more than sufficient for you to have a successful outcome on the exam. The only requirement on your behalf is to actually put in the work, do the work. They give you all the materials. You don't need anything else. And yes, this is what I think. A lot of people might disagree and actually bombard you with labs on this platform or on that platform. But in my case, I would say that study the materials, do the labs they give you, and it's more than enough. Just put in the work.
Absolutely. That's fantastic advice. In my opinion, or in my case, I got the OSCP in 2017, I think in September, if I'm not wrong. And I think the latest update of OSCP has changed quite a few things, and they now have Active Directory and stuff like that. But in my case, in my experience, and in the experience of my peers, I think one of the key areas that you should brush up on if this is your first time doing your OSCP, which of course I'm guessing it is to have an understanding, just a basic rudimentary understanding of buffer overflows, because of course they may not play a huge part in OSCP, but having a good understanding of buffer overflows before you get into that is, in my opinion, very important, because there's nothing worse than getting started with the OSCP and learning about buffer overflows, learning exactly what it is for the very first time, and then analyzing code and exploits and stuff like that. The other thing, and of course this will depend on a case-by-case basis, is if you don't have experience with Linux, like absolutely zero experience, definitely learn the fundamentals of using the utilities, using the man pages, and just get started with Linux, I think, before you actually get into it. But yeah, as Christy said, the OSCP, or the PWK, I think that's what the training material is called, is absolutely excellent. It's really, really comprehensive. And the thing I like about it is it actually doesn't hold your hand, but it gives you exactly what you need, or sets you on your way. And you can then move on from there, whether it's performing your own research or anything like that. So yeah.
A lot of people would say it's a beginner course, but given all these prerequisites, I wouldn't say it's a beginner course. And if you go, they are very transparent with this. If you go onto the website, onto their official website, and look into the frequently asked questions or the OSCP, they have a guiding material or something that's public. You can see that there are some prerequisites there, which in my case, in my view, I would say is not actually a beginner course, and you should be able to fly through those prerequisites before getting before buying the course, if you want to have a successful outcome from the first attempt.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Okay, so I think I've gone through all the questions that I had. Did you have any other questions that you wanted to get to?
I think we're actually good to go for this session. Quite a few in this session. We will actually be looking forward to more questions, more very specific questions. Like I said in the very beginning of this, we're really looking forward to your questions. We're looking forward to feedback. Tell us, interact with us in the comments. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. And also make sure to look, you can look to either of our individual channels. And also, we'll be linking the form, the Google form, where you can post your questions for future sessions. And with that said, thanks everyone for actually sticking to the end of this video. Thanks, Alexis, for being my co-host.
Likewise, thanks for joining us. So as Christy said, you can find the Google form in the description sections. And again, as I have to point out, please be succinct and clear and specific with your questions. It helps us answer them much better, as opposed to vague and generic questions. So you can find that in the description section. If you want to engage with us, you can engage with us on our channels or on our social networks. They'll also be linked in the description section. You can also check out our courses. They'll also be linked out in the description section if you're interested in learning specific skills. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and we'll be seeing you in the next episode.